David Thompson sat on the couch, glued to his phone, until Emily, his wife of almost a decade, called with disturbing news. Earlier, a private investigator had confirmed David's worst suspicions. Emily was on her way to Honolulu with her lover, despite the lies she'd been feeding him. David sat back, processing just how blind he'd been. 10 years devoted to her, now shattered by her deceit. Taking a slow sip of his coffee, he reclined, letting memories of their time together surface. They'd met in college 13 years ago, both majoring in business. Their romance had blossomed quickly, leading them to get married right after graduation. David joined his father's tire business, learning every role until he eventually became head of accounting. His goal was to take over the company from his father and replace Samuel Turner, the retiring CFO. Emily, on the other hand, pursued a career in real estate and excelled even during tough market downturns. They had a comfortable life, a nice home, new cars, and on the surface their marriage seemed stable. Though they didn't have children, he thought of it as a blessing at first. Emily had mentioned fertility problems and opted for a tubal ligation, and when he suggested adoption, she quickly shut him down. But recently, things started to feel off. Emily's social outings became more frequent, and she was coming home later and later. Whenever he tried to talk about it, she'd brush it off, saying it was just work stress. One night he asked, "What were you doing out so late?" She'd come home disheveled, the smell of cigarettes clinging to her clothes. "Just having a few drinks with friends," she shot back defensively. "It's my business, Jace. I can handle myself." Her tone was sharper than usual, catching him off guard. After noticing his reaction, she softened a bit, saying, "Sorry, Jace. Work's just been getting to me." He raised an eyebrow. "You've dealt with market pressures before without acting like this." "What's changed?" She let out a sigh. "Things are tougher than ever now. The competition's intense, and the stress is constant." He put a hand on her shoulder. "I get it, but don't take it out on me. I'm here for you." She hugged him, murmuring an apology, but he couldn't shake his concerns. "You should go freshen up," he said, wincing at the lingering smell of smoke. She shrugged and agreed, saying the club was smoky, and headed for the shower. By the time she climbed into bed, he was already asleep. Their closeness slowly dwindled too. What used to be regular intimacy had reduced to once every few weeks. Her interest in his life faded, and she started lying blatantly, like claiming she was at the office when he knew she wasn't. He chose not to confront her, fearing she'd react explosively. He often lay awake, wondering just how many lies she'd told him. One night, he glanced over at her, and his worry must have shown because she asked, "What's on your mind, Jace?" "I'm just worried," he admitted. "About what?" "Us," he said, feeling the words weigh heavy. "It feels like we're drifting apart. Do you still love me?" "Of course, sweetheart," she answered, pulling him into a hug. "You know that, right?" He let out a sigh. "Honestly, I don't know. You haven't said it in a while. You're out more than you're home." "I'm sorry," she replied softly. "Work has been overwhelming. I love you. Please trust me." "Can you show me a little more?" he asked, needing some reassurance. She nodded, kissed him, and that night they made love, easing his worries for a while. But a few weeks later, the same doubts crept back. One day, his friend Ethan called and asked to meet. "Sure, let's grab a beer," David agreed. "I need to tell you something, but not over the phone," Ethan said. When they met, Ethan dropped a bombshell. "I saw Emily today," Ethan began, hesitation in his voice. "Yeah, she's a real estate agent. Probably showing houses," David replied, shrugging. "I know, but this was different," Ethan insisted. "I didn't think real estate required that kind of closeness." David stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious?" "I wish I wasn't," Ethan said with a sigh. "She was with another man. They were holding hands, kissing. It wasn't just friendly." David's face fell. "That can't be right. Are you sure it was Emily?" Ethan pulled out a photo, showing him proof. David muttered a curse, asking Ethan to send the photo to him. "What are you going to do?" Ethan asked, watching his friend's reaction. "I'm not sure. This has completely blindsided me," David admitted, reeling. "My buddy's a private investigator," Ethan offered. "Want me to set you up?" "Please do," David said. "I need to know what's really going on." After they parted, David found Emily at home. "You're back early," she remarked, smiling. "Just in time," he said. "I was out with Ethan." "Everything okay with him?" she asked. "Not really," David replied. "His wife's been cheating on him." "Oh," Emily responded, feigning surprise. "That's terrible." "Yeah," David agreed, watching her reaction closely. "It would kill me if you ever betrayed me." He caught the smallest hint of a flinch before she replied. "I'd never do that, Jace," she said, pulling him close. "I love you too much." "Glad to hear it," he replied, kissing her. She went on to mention her company's upcoming convention. "I wanted to pack early and spend time with you before I leave," she explained. "Where's it being held?" he asked. "Las Vegas, at the Westgate Resort," she replied, adding that she'd be leaving Friday afternoon. He asked if she was up for another award this year, as she'd been honored several times before. She shrugged nonchalantly, and when he suggested they celebrate their anniversary together in Vegas, she declined, claiming she'd be too busy. The next day, David followed up with Ethan, who put him in touch with the private investigator. Before lunch, David met the man at his cluttered office. "Morning, Mr. Thompson." The investigator greeted him with a firm handshake. "Glad to meet you. I'm Charlie." David briefed him on Emily's Vegas trip. "Vegas, huh?" Charlie smirked. "Think she's hiding something?" "It's possible," David admitted. "I know a few people in Vegas who owe me favors," Charlie offered. "We can keep an eye on her. If you have a room number, we can set up some surveillance, though it'll cost extra." "Expected as much," David replied, nodding. "I just need the truth." Charlie handed him a voice-activated audio recorder. "Easy to use, just place it under her car seat and pick it up later. We'll catch anything she lets slip." "She usually parks at the airport," David noted. "That works. We'll handle it," Charlie replied confidently. "If she messes up, we'll find out. Here's my direct line for updates." David thanked him, writing a check from his personal account, avoiding their joint account. They'd always kept separate personal funds, agreeing to save up to 10% of their income for personal use. He'd usually spend his share on clothes for Emily or save for vacations, but now his funds were going towards something he never imagined needing. That night, as Emily packed for her trip, David offered to help, noticing how much she was bringing along. His curiosity got the better of him, and he took a quick peek inside her suitcase. What he saw stunned him. Birth control pills, even though she'd once claimed she'd had a tubal ligation. He quickly snapped a photo of her belongings, noting club clothes, revealing bikinis, and even an open micro-bikini he'd never seen her wear before. Quietly, he slipped an audio recorder into her car, ensuring it was activated before he locked up. This might be the last time, he thought sadly, aware of the growing distance between them as husband and wife. The next morning, Emily shared her hotel room number and promised she'd call him every night. "Love you," she said, giving him a quick kiss. "Love you too," he replied, watching her drive off with a sinking feeling. Once at work, he passed her room number along to Charlie, who acknowledged, "Got it. Thanks, we'll be ready to deploy the team." Later, Emily called from the airport, assuring him she'd check in once she arrived. "Love you," she repeated. "Love you too, baby," he echoed, masking his doubts. When his father sensed his distress, David confided a bit of what was going on. "That's rough, son," his father sympathized. "I never would have guessed." "Same here, Dad," David replied, grateful for the support. His father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "If you need anything, we're here for you." Leaving work early, David retrieved the audio recorder from Emily's car at the airport. Despite the car's neatness, doubts still gnawed at him. On the drive home, he decided to listen to the recording, hoping to find nothing incriminating. Initially, it was just road noise and her radio, but halfway through, the truth emerged. He heard her connect to someone via Bluetooth. "Hey, baby," a man's voice greeted her. "Hello, stallion," she flirted back, adding, "Missed my stud muffin." David scoffed. "Who's this clown?" "Last week was amazing," the man reminisced. "Glad you enjoyed it," she giggled. "Plans for next week are all set, right?" he asked. "Already arranged," she confirmed, her voice smug. "Did you tell your husband?" he pressed. "Not yet," she replied. "But I've got it under control. He doesn't suspect a thing." "He better not," the man muttered. "He'll believe anything," she boasted, a note of pride in her voice. As the call ended, David sat in stunned silence, the recording confirming the affair and her betrayal. Replaying it to ensure he'd heard correctly, David was gutted. She wasn't just cheating. She had plans that didn't include him during what should have been their anniversary. Furious, he grabbed a beer, sitting at his desk and reviewing recent events. How many signs had he overlooked? What else was she hiding? Determined to find out, he made his way to her office in the spare bedroom, unlocking her desk with a key he knew she kept in the jewelry box. Inside, he discovered shocking evidence of her betrayal. Emily's personal account held over $250,000, a staggering amount that far exceeded the savings limit they had agreed upon. Reviewing her expenses, he found purchases for lavish gifts, including a pricey men's Rolex, likely for her lover. Her statements also revealed visits to Planned Parenthood, all paid in cash. He then found a recent receipt for Plan B pills, bought only a few days earlier. Another discovery hit him hard: a substantial down payment on an upscale apartment in an affluent neighborhood. Was this her love nest, he wondered, noting the utilities and new furniture purchases. Further investigation led him to her computer. Beneath the keyboard, he found a list of passwords and accessed her email. To his shock, she hadn't even bothered to clear her saved credentials, showing her complete confidence in keeping him in the dark. As he sifted through her inbox, he found email exchanges with James Carter, the man she was cheating with. Their explicit conversations revealed encounters dating back nearly a year, right around when he'd first noticed changes in her behavior. In one exchange from 6 months ago, James had asked, "Did you take care of that little issue?" "Yep," she replied. "Went in for a procedure today." "Shame you didn't keep the baby," James wrote. "You could have passed it off as David's." "I can't do that," she replied. "He thinks I can't have kids, and he'd know it wasn't his." David's stomach turned, realizing she'd hidden this from him, all while mocking his trust in her. He continued reading, finding another email where James suggested they meet in her marital bed. She had refused, replying, "I won't betray David like that." Then she added a remark that stung deeply. "That idiot has no clue." James encouraged her to consider a place of her own, saying, "You make enough, and your husband wouldn't question it." Her reply, "Maybe you're right. I'll start looking." Just over a month ago, she'd followed through, putting down a deposit on a condo and preparing it as their private escape. He printed out the emails and copied the receipts, trying to stay calm as her number flashed on his phone. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "It's me, baby," she greeted him warmly. "You okay? You sound off." "Just a pounding headache," he lied, stifling the rage building inside him. "Take something for it and get some rest," she urged. "Love you and miss you." "Yeah, same here," he muttered, ending the call, wondering if she sensed his lack of warmth. "She doesn't deserve my affection," he thought bitterly. Determined to know more about James, he searched Emily's company website and found him. James Carter, her regional manager, her boss. Furious, David printed James's profile page and added it to the growing stack of evidence. He thought of checking her new apartment for more proof. As he sorted through her documents, he found a code labeled "Alarm System." Of course she'd write it down, he thought, closing her laptop, disgusted at the depths of her deception. He left the house with a pair of latex gloves he'd grabbed from the garage, wanting to be cautious about leaving any evidence behind. After locating her apartment complex, he pulled into her designated parking spot, put on the gloves, and approached her door. The key he'd taken from her jewelry box slid easily into the lock, and with a click, the door opened. Inside, he spotted the alarm remote, entered the code he'd discovered, and made sure the alarm was off. Turning on the light, he took a slow look around, noticing how she'd decorated the place. The furniture choices, typical Emily, she's always had a knack for decorating. Too bad her sense of loyalty doesn't match her taste in furniture. As he suspected, there were no photos of him anywhere. This was her little sanctuary, her hideout from their marriage. Moving into the kitchen, he saw a few plates and utensils, but the fridge was practically empty and the pantry didn't hold much more. Oddly, the apartment was fully furnished with everything she might need. Flower paintings hung on the walls, and a big flat-screen TV took up space in the living room. In the bedroom, he saw lace curtains draped elegantly over the windows, falling just above an electric heater. A fire hazard if he ever saw one. Opening the drawers, he found unfamiliar underwear and, from the men's boxers mixed in, was pretty sure he wasn't the only man frequenting this place. He pulled out his phone and started snapping pictures. In the nightstand, a card from James confirmed what he'd been thinking. "Thanks for the watch," it read. "Looking forward to your housewarming." Love, James' anger simmered as he read the note, imagining for a moment how a confrontation with James might play out. In the dressing area, more clothes, both men's and women's, hung side by side. The bathroom sink had 2 toothbrushes, and his and hers towels were laid out by the shower. He took more photos, making sure to capture every incriminating detail. In the second bedroom, he found a small desk and chair with a network cable that was probably for her laptop. Amid the letters from utility companies, he spotted her name and address and made sure they were clear in the pictures. The windows in that room were covered by lace curtains, like in the bedroom, once again draping over an electric heater. He noted more potential fire hazards, including a lack of smoke detectors in the bedrooms and an old one in the kitchen. He wondered if it even had a working battery. Double-checking that he'd left everything just as it was, he turned off the lights, rearmed the alarm, and locked the door behind him. Back in his car, he thought about his next steps. Divorce was unavoidable. He couldn't trust her anymore, even if she broke things off with this guy and gave up the apartment. But he knew guys like him rarely came out well in divorce. He could only hope her higher salary would mean he'd be spared any alimony. Talking to a lawyer seemed like the next logical step. He also hoped that, since the apartment was in her name alone, he wouldn't lose the house or have to split its value. She'd abandoned him the moment she secretly bought this place. With no kids in the picture, there was no worry about custody or child support, but he was set on getting some form of payback. Jail time wasn't on his list, though. He had no intention of letting this mess cost him his freedom. When he got home, he flipped through the phone book until he found a listing for Jamesery Carter. Figuring it was worth a shot, he dialed the number. A woman answered, "Carter Residence." "Is this Mrs. Carter?" he asked. "Yes, it is. Who's calling?" "David Thompson," he introduced himself. "Your husband's the regional manager at Acme Real Estate, right?" "Yes," she replied, sounding cautious, "but he's away at a conference this weekend and has meetings out of town next week. You'll need to leave a message with the regional office." "Actually, Mrs. Carter," David continued, "I wanted to speak with you." "Oh?" she replied, sounding puzzled. "Yes, ma'am," David said, trying to soften the blow. "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but my wife is having an affair with your husband." "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice tense. "Absolutely," he replied, "and I've got proof. I could even show you where they meet if you're interested." He heard a shaky sigh on the other end. "Could we meet tomorrow?" she asked. "Certainly," he agreed. "What time is best for you?" "Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon." After giving her directions to Emily's apartment, he hung up, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. He went to his desk and jotted down a list of things to do. First priority, change the locks before meeting James's wife. The urge to drown his sorrows in whiskey flickered through his mind, but he ignored it, settling instead for cold pizza while he mulled over his options. Content with his plan, he headed upstairs and went to bed. The next morning, he hit the hardware store for new locks and made an extra key for Emily's apartment. By noon, the locks were changed. After a quick shower, he grabbed his audio recorder and printed emails from Emily's account and drove to the apartment to meet James's wife. As he arrived, he noticed Emily's car and a Toyota Corolla parked nearby, with a dark-haired woman inside. He tapped on her window. "Are you Olivia Carter?" "Yes," she confirmed. He opened the door for her. "David Thompson," he introduced himself, offering her a pair of latex gloves. "Shall we?" he said. "I'll show you their little hideaway." Using the new key, he unlocked the door and disarmed the alarm. Once inside, he led her to the bedroom, opening drawers and the closet where James's clothes were hanging. "Oh my God," she gasped. "I've been looking for these. I had no idea where they were going." "Your husband wearing a Rolex these days?" David asked. She nodded, mentioning it was supposedly a gift from work. Shaking his head, David showed her the card from the nightstand. As she read James's message, her face crumpled and she began to cry. "Is that his handwriting?" David asked gently. "Yes," she sobbed. "There's more," he said, handing over emails and playing a recorded conversation. She read the emails and listened, visibly pained. "I'm sorry," David said, putting a comforting arm around her. He barely held back his own frustration. "It's not your fault," she replied, taking a deep breath. "I had my suspicions, but never had proof." She straightened up, her face determined. "What's the plan?" "I'm filing for divorce," he told her. "And I'm kicking him out as soon as he shows his face," she said, her tone hardened. Then she paused, her eyes lighting up. "What if we help them move in together here?" David thought for a moment, then grinned. "I like it, but we'll need to move fast. They'll be back soon." "James said he'd be out for a week after the convention," she shared, "so I bet Emily will be making her own excuse to leave." Recalling the recorded conversation, David muttered, "Damn, you're probably right." But he was determined. "I want her things out of my house immediately." "Agreed," she said, nodding. "Let's meet back here in 3 hours." "Sounds like a plan," David replied. "I'll pack her stuff and be back." 3 hours later, they reconvened, their cars packed with bags filled with the cheetah's belongings. They piled everything in the second bedroom without much care, knowing it'd take hours for Emily and James to sort through. "I wasn't exactly careful with his stuff," she commented, smirking. David chuckled. "Same here." They shared a high five, then he turned to her, noticing her small, graceful build, and wondering how someone like James could cheat on her. "I don't know about you, but I'm starving," he announced. "Me too," she agreed. "I could really go for a big, cheesy burger." "I know just the place," he said with a grin. "My treat if you're up for it." "Lead the way," she replied. They drove to his favorite bar. She looked at it skeptically. "A bar?" "Trust me," he assured her. "They make the best burgers here. You'll love it." "All right," she said, though with a slight grin. "But I hope you're not planning to get me drunk and take advantage." He laughed. "Tempting as that might sound, I'm not that kind of guy." "Darn," she joked, and they both laughed. Inside, they ordered beers, burgers, and fries. Over the meal, they swapped stories about their marriages gone wrong, realizing their lives had taken similar paths. College sweethearts, quick weddings, and dreams that had split apart. He left the house with a clear plan, grabbing latex gloves from the garage to avoid leaving fingerprints. After finding her apartment complex, he parked in her designated spot, slipped on the gloves, and tried a key he'd found in her jewelry box. The door unlocked with ease. Spotting the alarm remote, he keyed in the code he'd previously discovered, ensuring the alarm was disabled, then turned on the light to survey the apartment. As he looked around, he noticed that Emily's taste in furniture was on full display. Always had an eye for style, he thought wryly. Shame her loyalty doesn't match her decor. True to his suspicions, there were no photos of him anywhere. This was her private retreat, her love nest. In the kitchen, he saw a few scattered dishes, but noted that the fridge and pantry were nearly empty. The apartment was fully furnished, though, with floral wall art and a large flat-screen TV in the living room. He continued his survey into the bedroom, which was decorated with lace curtains flowing over the windows, draped just above an electric heater, a fire hazard he noted with a shake of his head. Opening the drawers, he found underwear he didn't recognize and men's clothing he suspected was James's. He took out his phone, snapping photos of the incriminating evidence. In the nightstand drawer, he found a card from James, reading, "Thanks for the watch. Looking forward to our housewarming. Love, James." Fury built up as he imagined confronting him. The dressing room was filled with both men's and women's clothes, and in the bathroom he saw 2 toothbrushes and his and hers towels. He took more pictures. In the second bedroom, there was only a small desk and chair, along with a network cable, likely for Emily's laptop. A few utility bills with her name and address confirmed her connection to the place. As he walked through the apartment, he noted potential hazards. Lace curtains over electric heaters, the lack of smoke detectors in the bedrooms, and an outdated one in the kitchen. Satisfied he'd documented everything, he turned off the lights, rearmed the security system, and locked the door behind him. Returning to his car, he thought about the future. Divorce was unavoidable. He couldn't see himself ever trusting her again, even if she ended things with James and gave up the apartment. As he considered the next steps, he was comforted by the fact that her higher income might spare him from paying alimony, and with her sole ownership of this place, he might not have to split their home. Consulting a lawyer was essential. After returning home, he flipped through the phone book, finding an ad for a Jameson Carter. Hoping this was her James, he dialed the number. A woman answered. "Carter residence," she said. "Is this Mrs. Carter?" he asked. "Yes, it is," she replied. "Who's calling?" "My name's David Thompson. Your husband is the regional manager for Acme Real Estate, correct?" "Yes, but he's away at a conference this weekend," she answered, sounding confused. "Actually, Mrs. Carter, it's you I'd like to speak with," he said gently. "Oh?" She sounded wary. "Ma'am," he continued, "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but my wife is having an affair with your husband." Silence hung over the line. Then, "Are you sure?" "Yes, absolutely. I can even show you where they meet if you'd like." She sighed. "Would tomorrow at 1 work for you?" "Perfect. I'll be there," he confirmed. After ending the call, he made a list of tasks, starting with changing the locks on his house. Tempted to drown his sorrows in a drink, he opted for leftover pizza instead, running over his plans in his mind. Satisfied, he went to bed. The next morning, he replaced the locks, showered, gathered his evidence, emails and recordings, and drove to meet Olivia Carter. When he arrived at the apartment complex, he saw Emily's car parked nearby and approached the vehicle where an attractive woman sat, looking apprehensive. "You must be Olivia Carter," he said, introducing himself as David Thompson and offering her a pair of latex gloves. "Ready to see the evidence?" With his spare key, he unlocked the door, disarmed the alarm, and led her inside. He opened drawers in the bedroom to reveal James's clothes and Emily's belongings. "Oh my God," she gasped. "I wondered where his clothes were disappearing to." "Has he been sporting a Rolex lately?" he asked. She nodded, saying it was supposedly a gift from his company. David retrieved the card from the nightstand, and she read it, tears welling in her eyes. "Is this his handwriting?" he asked. "Yes," she sobbed, as he offered her tissues and some emotional support. "I'm filing for divorce on Monday," David announced. "I'll kick him out as soon as he gets back," she said, her face set with determination. An idea dawned on her. "What if we help them move in together here?" He chuckled. "I like it." They agreed to meet back at the apartment in a few hours, their cars filled with their spouses' belongings. Once there, they unceremoniously dumped the bags in the second bedroom, hardly worried about what might break. Afterward, David offered to take her to a burger joint nearby. Over drinks and a big cheesy burger, they shared their frustrations about their broken marriages, discovering how much they had in common. Midway through, David's phone buzzed with Emily's caller ID. Answering in a neutral tone, he greeted her. "Hey, baby," she slurred, clearly drunk. "Guess what? I won the Best Sales Award." "Congratulations," he replied flatly. "And they want me to stay in Vegas another week to train some new agents," she continued, weaving a lie he already knew. Feigning excitement, he played along. "That's great. But what about our anniversary this Wednesday?" "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, her tone light with fake remorse. "We'll celebrate when I get back." "Sure," he replied. "Your work is important." "What's that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "Nothing," he said, shrugging it off. "Just that it's our 10th anniversary and all. But you do what you need to." After ending the call, he turned to Olivia, who had been listening. "She's skipping our anniversary for him," he muttered. "Unbelievable," she replied, putting a comforting hand on his. Afterward, David called his private investigator, Charlie, for an update. Charlie confirmed his suspicions. Emily and James had been together the previous night and were caught on video. Charlie promised to email him the footage. Back at David's place, they settled into his office to watch the video. "Would you like something to drink?" he offered. "Cola, if you have it," she replied. Returning with 2 sodas, David started the video. They watched as Emily and James shared intimate moments, then talked about their spouses. "What do you think our spouses are doing right now?" Emily asked in the video. "Olivia's probably watching some boring movie or reading one of her silly books," James replied with a smirk. They laughed at the thought, making David and Olivia's stomachs churn. Finally, David stopped the video. "I've seen enough," he declared, and Olivia nodded through her tears. "Would you mind if I stayed the night?" she asked quietly. "No funny business, just some company." "Of course," he said gently. "Stay as long as you like." They shared an unspoken understanding as they retired upstairs. David found an old t-shirt for her to sleep in, and after she changed, they settled into bed together, drawing comfort from each other's presence. The next morning, he woke with her beside him, and she greeted him with a sleepy smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead." "Good morning, beautiful," he replied, heading to the bathroom. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Upon returning home, David found Olivia already tidying up the kitchen, preparing scrambled eggs and bacon for breakfast. He glanced at the clock, 8:30 a.m., then his gaze returned to Olivia, who was casually cooking in his old t-shirt. For a brief moment, he reminisced about the times Emily used to make breakfast for him. "Wow, that smells amazing," he remarked, watching her work. "I hope you don't mind me taking over your kitchen," she said, a hint of playfulness in her voice. "Not at all," he assured her, smiling as he sat down. "I can't remember the last time someone made me breakfast." "Emily never cooked for you?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. "She used to," David acknowledged, his voice laced with the memory, "but she stopped a while back. Said it took too much time, and she had to prepare for her clients." "Damn," Olivia muttered under her breath. "Exactly," David agreed, the bitter truth hanging in the air. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen as Olivia placed a generous plate in front of him. David devoured the meal hungrily, like a man who hadn't eaten in weeks. "Wow, that was amazing. Do you cook like this every morning?" he asked, savoring the last bite. "Whenever I can," she replied with a smile. David's phone suddenly buzzed, displaying Charlie's name. "Hey, Charlie," he greeted, wiping his mouth. "Working Sundays now?" Charlie chuckled on the other end. "More often than I'd like," David admitted, a dry laugh escaping him. "What's up?" "I just wanted to update you," Charlie continued. "Your wife and her lover boarded their flight from Las Vegas just before 6 this morning. They had a 40-minute layover in Los Angeles, and the plane just departed an hour ago. They'll land in Honolulu in about 5 hours. I've got the flight details if you need them." "Got it," David confirmed, scribbling down the information. "They're on American Airlines Flight 31, Charlie added. "I've got a contact in Honolulu who will track them once they land." "Thanks, Charlie," David replied, ending the call. He turned to Olivia, who was finishing her meal. "Well," he began, his voice tight with frustration, "here's the update. They're on their way to Hawaii." As the plane ascended, Emily settled into her seat, glancing out the window at the vast Pacific Ocean below. She sighed, her mind racing. "This is it," she thought, turning to her left and noticing James already asleep in the seat beside her. She closed her eyes briefly, reflecting on the past decade. A brief pang of guilt washed over her for betraying her trusting husband. But deep down, she justified it. She told herself that it was just another poor decision in a string of them, and she hoped it would all resolve without David ever finding out. "Maybe our marriage will survive," she mused. "We'll grow old together, retire peacefully." Her first mistake had been telling David that she couldn't conceive. The truth was, she was perfectly capable, but she had no desire for a family. Motherhood didn't appeal to her, and she didn't want to burden herself with the commitment. She convinced David that medical issues necessitated a tubal ligation, and he accepted it. But when complications arose with her IUD, she opted for conventional birth control pills, supplementing them with the calendar method to avoid pregnancy during her peak fertility. But it wasn't enough. Twice she found herself pregnant. The first time, fearing David's reaction and her own reluctance toward parenthood, she arranged for an abortion, covering the costs privately. She kept it a secret, thanks to their separate bank accounts. The second time, 6 months ago with James, she made the same choice, keeping David in the dark once again. Over the years, Emily had managed to keep her extramarital affairs under wraps. In the first 7 years of marriage, she had remained loyal, but that changed when she met a handsome, affluent client. A single fleeting decision led to passionate encounters in a luxurious house he purchased after their affair. What had begun as occasional discreet liaisons quickly turned into something more. And when she met James, everything shifted. James was everything David wasn't. David was methodical, cautious, and analytical, while James was impulsive, living in the moment. David's life had been mapped out for him since the beginning, destined to rise in the family business and eventually take over as CEO. James, on the other hand, lived each day without a clear future, relishing the unpredictability of life. In bed, David had always prioritized her pleasure, but James was forceful, dominating in ways that left her breathless. Though she initially had their encounters in discreet motels or houses they were selling, Emily became more daring. She grew weary of the secrecy and purchased her own apartment, a private sanctuary where she could meet James without fear of being caught. It was a bold move, one that allowed her to continue her affair with less risk. When David began to voice concerns about their relationship, Emily briefly redirected her attention to him, trying to repair the marriage. But as soon as James sought reconciliation, Emily's resolve wavered. They decided to file their taxes separately, securing more financial freedom for her and James, and avoiding questions about their assets. Everything came to a head with the Hawaii trip. It was the perfect cover, a business trip for her and a getaway for her and James. She'd deceived David, telling him she was going to Las Vegas, confident that he'd believe her without question. She regretted missing their 10th anniversary, but assured herself she'd make it up to him when she returned. It was all part of the plan. As the plane soared over the ocean, Emily smirked, imagining the time she'd spend with James. He'd bought her a daring open bikini for their trip, eager to watch her undress and indulge in self-pleasure on the beach. The thought stirred something inside her, tempting her to give in to the urge right then and there. As the plane hit a patch of turbulence, the sudden change in pitch and the frantic reactions around her startled Emily, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the thrill ahead. Yet, as the plane descended and the situation grew more dire, panic erupted in the cabin. Oxygen masks deployed and passengers screamed. The plane's descent became inevitable, and Emily's thoughts shifted to the reality of the situation. This is it. We're going down, she thought, her body pressed into her seat with the weight of dread. Tears streamed down her face as she glanced at her phone, stealing one last look at her life, before she made her final decision. Back at home, David and Olivia finished up breakfast and began clearing the table, ready to strategize about their unfaithful partners. David felt a newfound closeness with Olivia, an intimacy that had been absent with Emily for months. As he returned to the table with a fresh cup of coffee, the two sat down to plan their next moves. David's phone buzzed with Emily's name flashing across the screen. He put it on speaker and answered, immediately hearing her panicked voice, muffled by background noise and distant shouting. "Jace!" she screamed, barely audible over the chaos. "Emily, what's happening?" David asked, straining to catch her words. "Plane down." Her voice crackled before the call abruptly cut off. David and Olivia exchanged a glance, both stunned. He tried calling Emily back, but it went straight to voicemail. "Olivia, call James," he urged. She fumbled for her phone, dialing his number. No answer. Straight to voicemail again. Frustrated, David headed to his home office and powered up his computer. After some searching, he found the airline's contact number. He dialed and, after some back and forth, managed to get through to a representative who confirmed they were investigating reports of a plane crash. "They're looking into it," David told Olivia, hanging up the phone. "They've got our contact details and Emily's, as well as James's. We should hear something soon." They moved into the living room and switched on the TV, hoping for an update. David flipped through the channels, but no breaking news popped up. After a few tense minutes, he spotted a news flash. An American Airlines flight bound for Honolulu had gone down in the Pacific Ocean. The report was vague, offering no specifics. Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. David wrapped his arms around her, feeling the weight of the moment. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel a pang of fear for Emily. An hour later, the phone rang again, snapping them both to attention. David muted the TV before answering. "Mr. Thompson?" A woman's voice came through. "Yes," he replied. "I'm calling to inform you that your wife's flight has crashed," she said. "I don't have further details at this time, but we'll update you as soon as we know more." David hung up the call, and the two of them sat in silence, each grappling with the gravity of the news. Soon, Olivia's phone rang with the same grim news. A short time later, David's father called. It wasn't uncommon for his parents to check in during moments like this. "Hey, Jace," his father greeted. "Did you see the news about the accident?" "Yeah, Dad," David said, his voice strained. "It's terrible. By the way, how's Emily?" Isn't she supposed to be coming back from Vegas? His father asked. David sighed deeply. She wasn't with me, Dad. She was on that plane. She was with James. What? His father exclaimed, shocked. What was she doing going to Hawaii without you? David didn't hide the truth. She was with her boyfriend, Dad. Oh my God, his father replied, sounding stunned. I'm so sorry, son. Take a week off, clear your head. Let Samuel know if you need anything. Just give me a call. David's thoughts were a swirl of sorrow and anger. Emily was likely gone, and yet part of him felt a deep bitterness, not just for her betrayal, but for his own inaction. Thanks, Dad, David said, grateful for the support, even if it didn't ease the pain. After hanging up, he turned to Olivia, his mind racing. Olivia, he began, why don't you sell your apartment and move in here with me? It'll be easier with everything going on. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Are you serious? She asked. Absolutely, David affirmed. There's a spare room upstairs, and we can help each other through all this. Olivia hesitated for a moment, then responded, Okay, but there's one condition. What's that? David asked, curious. She looked him in the eye, the tears now brimming. That I share your bed. David's mind raced. Things were moving fast, but part of him felt a weight lift. He had spent so long in a marriage where love was a distant memory, and now, with Olivia, there was a chance for something new. Really? He asked, almost unsure. After everything? Really, Olivia said softly, a slight smile playing at the edges of her lips. It's been ages since I felt genuinely comfortable with my husband. Last night was the first time in years I felt fulfilled. David's heart ached with an unexpected warmth. That's more than all right, he said, pulling her into a hug. We'll make this work. I'll be here when you get back tonight. After she left to pack, David made another call, this time to Lucy, Emily's colleague. Hello? Lucy answered. Hey, Lucy, it's David Thompson. Oh, hi, David, Lucy said. How's Hawaii? David hesitated, then spoke the truth. Emily didn't go to Hawaii with me. She went with James. What? Lucy exclaimed, shocked. But where are they now? They were on that plane that crashed this morning, David said quietly. I don't think either of them made it. Oh my God, Lucy gasped. Do you know if she survived? David's voice faltered. I doubt it. No one survived. I'm so sorry. Lucy's voice softened. I'll take care of the paperwork. The company has life insurance for employees. I'll need the airline details. Can you provide them? David nodded, though she couldn't see it. I'll gather what I can. But I've got a question for you, Lucy. What's that? She asked. Were you aware of Emily's affair with James? David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lucy paused. I had suspicions. There were whispers, but nothing solid. We don't gossip about personal stuff at work, David. I understand, he replied. Well, I'll get those details to you. Thanks, Lucy. Of course. And again, I'm really sorry, David. As David hung up the phone, he turned to Olivia, who was sitting quietly by his side, a mixture of sadness and something else lingering in her eyes. That night, while they watched TV, a report flashed on screen about the crash. The plane's final moments had been captured by a nearby cargo airliner. An amateur video showed the plane descending rapidly, nose first, and disintegrating on impact with the water. Olivia gasped, "Oh God, David." David nodded silently, squeezing her hand. Neither of them cried for Emily that night. What had been, had ended. They had each other now, and they would move forward. In the months that followed, David and Olivia navigated their way through the aftermath, selling properties, dealing with insurance claims, and clearing out the remnants of their pasts. They spent the money from the settlement wisely, rebuilding their lives piece by piece. Eventually, David proposed to Olivia, and she accepted with joy. "I've been waiting for this," she whispered as he slipped the ring on her finger. David smiled, his heart full. "I love you more than anything." "I love you even more," she replied, laughing. They embraced, both ready to start their new life together, with one condition: no more flying. "Don't worry," David assured her. "We'll make our own way from here on out."